As many of us may have read in the papers or maybe seen in the news, just about 10 days ago, just right across town at the Sotheby's auction house, a conceptual and satirical art piece of a banana duct taped to the wall, titled Comedian, by an artist, Maurizio Catalan, sold for how much? Does anyone know? Great, that's exactly right, $6.2 million. A banana duct taped to a wall, $6.2 million, 5.2 for the banana and the duct tape, and then the $1 million going to the auction house. I never imagined that I would give or begin a Dvar Torah talking about a banana. And I also never imagined, and I think I'm not alone in this one, in saying that we would be witness to a banana selling for $6.2 million. At the surface level, as I hear, and like the title implies, there's some twisted humor to all of this. And as Catalan had hoped when he created the piece in 2019, it's meant to be a real critique of the conceptual art world and how market rates are settled and set. But underneath it lies enormous questions and deeply uncomfortable realities about the society that we live in today. After the sale of this banana to a cryptocurrency entrepreneur, the Times followed up with an equally pretty kind of quirky piece that also was deeply disturbing. And it was about the fruit vendor outside of the auction house who had sold the banana that went for $6.2 million earlier that day for a whopping, anyone? It was 35 cents for one banana, 25 if you bought four. They bought only one. He sold it for 35 cents. Shah Alam, a 74-year-old who moved to New York from Bangladesh to be closer to his daughters. He has compromised vision, and he works 12-hour shifts, rain or shine, making $12 an hour. It's not even minimum wage. Making around under $150 a week, and he pays $500 in rent for his shared basement apartment in the Bronx. While the juxtaposition of the life of Shah Amal and the wealth of this entrepreneur who bought the banana, and you know what he did with it? Did anyone know what he did with it? He ate it yesterday morning publicly, and he said he was eating it not only as a part of the art, but as a part of art history. He wanted to be a part of something bigger, and he thought that this, and it likely will be. But he ate it yesterday, but the juxtaposition of these two, it becomes an extreme mirror for us to examine the economic injustices of our world. And that in and of itself is enough, but it actually wasn't even that in the article that really struck me. It was the visceral reaction of Amal that impacted me the most. When the reporter told him about this banana art piece and how much it sold for in the auction house right in front of his face, he cried. He cried. He said, "I'm a poor man," in a broken voice with tears in his eyes. His tears are heartbreaking. It's not just his cry. It's the cry of everyone and anyone who has cried out when life feels unbearable and feels unfair. It's the cry of unjustifiable pain, the absurdity of the eccentric nature of who succeeds, who is given power, and the heartache of the random morality of the world. And it's the cry that echoes the very cry and pain of Esav in this week's Parashat, Toledot. Esav and Jacob are the twins of Rebekah and Isaac, and they have a fraught relationship, to say the least, from the moment of their conception. They fight in the womb. They enter the world while Jacob is clinging on to the heel of Esav. They're opposites in interest, Jacob a homemaker and Esav a hunter. They are each favored by opposite parents. And earlier on in the story, we know that Jacob tricked Esav into selling him his birthright, or took advantage of him to do it. And then finally, Jacob, with the help of his mother Rebekah, deceives and manipulates his nearly blind father, Isaac, by dressing up like Esau to receive the blessing of the firstborn. And the Torah gives us this scene vividly, and it's actually what we're going to read today. And so it says, "No sooner had Jacob left the presence of his father Isaac, after Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, then his brother Esau came in back from his hunt." It feels almost like a play scene. "He too prepared a dish and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, 'Let my father sit up and eat of his son's game, so that you may give me your innermost blessing.' His father Isaac said to him, 'Who are you?' And he said, 'I'm your son, Esau, your firstborn.' Isaac was seized with very violent trembling, and the Midrash says the trembling was even worse than the trembling he had when his father bound him on the altar for the Akedah. 'Who was it then,' he demanded, 'that hunted game and brought it to me? Moreover, I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him. Now he must remain blessed.' When Esau heard his father's words, when he heard the words of his father, Vayitzak tza'aka gedola umar'a ad me'od, he burst into a wild and huge and bitter sobbing. He said to his father, 'Bless me too, father.' But Isaac answered, 'Your brother came with guile and took away your blessing.' Esau said, 'Was he then named Jacob that he might supplant me these 2 times? First, he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing?' He then added, 'Have you not reserved a blessing for me?' Isaac answered, saying to Esau, 'But I have made him master over you. I have given him all his brothers for servants and sustained him with grain and wine. What then can I still do for you, my son?' And Esau said to his father, 'Have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too.' And then it says, Vayisa Esav kolo vayevk. And Esau lifted his voice and he cried. He cried. I've heard and learned this story many times, but I hadn't really internalized the heartbreaking reaction of Esau. Esau's cry is the same tears of Amal, of this fruit vendor, as he heard about the sale of the banana, of all who cry out from injustice, who question why the world is as it is. It captures the cry of anyone who has ever felt taken advantage of or mistreated. It is this visceral vulnerability created by the unfair cruelties of the world, whether it be economic, religious, war, suffering, hate. It's the same tears, these very tears, the tears of this injustice or this uncertainty or this questioning of the way of the world, that the Midrash believes blinded Isaac in the very first place. The rabbis suggest that Isaac's later blindness, which is what we see in our Parsha, and it's what allows him to confuse his 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, that it was caused by the tears of the angels crying over the possibility of him being offered up as a sacrifice by his father. As Abraham bound his son to the altar, the angels' tears fell into the eyes of Isaac, impairing his vision. They wanted to shield him from the traumatic image of seeing his father lift a knife above his head. And then ultimately, it's actually an angel who's the one to cry out and say to Abraham, "Stop. Do not sacrifice your son. Don't do it." These angels, they cry this tears of injustice as they witness the injustice at this very moment. But they don't only cry, they also take action against it, which is also what we see with Esau. Esau cries, and his cries actually lead to him receiving a blessing, although it's not equal, and it's not the one of the firstborn that he wanted. But in his heartache, he pushes his father to realize that there is another blessing that he has to give. It's exactly what we see. Our Parsha actually starts here with the end of the blessing of what our reading today is going to end with the blessing of Jacob, and we'll also hear this blessing of Esau, but he cries and he ultimately gets a blessing. And it's also the same cry of Sha'amal, and his cry also reached out to the people of New York City, and even this entrepreneur who brought the banana. So about 4 days ago, this piece has been unfolding as I was writing this. Actually, I had to keep going back to it. So 4 days ago, after the article about Amal appeared in the Times, a fellow New Yorker, stirred by the injustice of it all, created a GoFundMe page to help raise money for the fruit vendor. And this is what the page actually reads. It's amazing. Do we really want to live in a city where we can shrug off a street vendor who's moved to tears by the fact that he's been made the butt of a joke involving an amount of wealth obscene to him, while celebrating some wise person for figuring out how to make $6 million from that joke? Is this utter and gross indifference? Isn't what ails us what is? If you feel the way I feel, join me in helping this man benefit, however minutely, from a story that is otherwise vulgar in every way imaginable. I will walk to the fruit stand myself next week after Thanksgiving and take a video of me handing him money myself. If I don't find him, GoFundMe will return your money. This is what the campaign said. And it was wildly successful, doubling its goal of $5,000 in only 2 days, and as of yesterday before Shabbat, it had reached $14,000. It gives a bit of relief that there is still some goodness and sanity in our city and in the midst of all of this absurdity. And if anyone saw in the Times yesterday, they continued an article that actually said that the entrepreneur potentially offered to buy thousands of dollars worth of fruit from the stand, actually hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fruit from the stand. But then the piece said it was very complicated, and it went on to say that this is very unlikely to actually work out because of how difficult it is to actually get so many bananas to a stand. Like, this is really, it highlights how challenging and how broken this system is. And in this piece, there was another vendor who was interviewed, and he said, it's definitely an inequality. And then he went on to quote a Bangladeshi idiom, and he says, it is the difference between heaven and hell. So even with these little pieces of goodness, there's really no full happy ending. Not for Amal, not for Isaac, and not for Esau. Isaac, although alive, he remains traumatized and even becomes a cog in this unjust way of the world. And Esau, although blessed, lives in anger and pain, disconnected from his family for years. And Amal, the fruit vendor, although his life may change with some extra cash, and we hope a little bit helps, the unjust ways of our world continue to rage on, and it's not changing because of this. I find myself, like many, struggling with the randomness of it all, the inability to make any sense of it, how the place we are born impacts us just as much as the opportunities we are given or not given, how unfair it can all feel, how often we think there is only one blessing to give, and whoever gets it, gets it. None of this is new. It just took a $6.2 million banana taped to a wall and the tears of a fruit vendor struggling to make a living and sharing in my confusion, and also that echoing of the tears of Esau, who mourns the unfair loss of his blessing, to bring it all back to the forefront. None of this feels like low-hanging fruit, and I think that's why it becomes so difficult. And that's why the tears come from the fact that there are no obvious answers to any of this. Yet I still think that these cries, we can't and must not ignore them. They come to remind us that the individuals pained by the broken system, as well as the broken systems themselves, are there, and they're real, and we need to face them. They come to reawaken our empathy and urgency for action. As we read the stories of the Torah or we read the headlines in the news, can we find in ourselves the ability to look at the individuals affected by them, to seek and look and see the faces and hear the tears, to feel a sense of obligation to seek out the root cause and systemic issues that are underlying all of these tears, and to help make a happier ending, even if it's not that fairy tale happy ending that we dream of, to help be a part of a small bit of making it better. When we hear this cry, let us ask ourselves how we will show up and face it, even if it's just one banana at a time. Shabbat Shalom.